Most people think they know who's in charge just by looking at the car someone drives or the shoes they wear. My father-in-law, Arthur, was one of those people. He spent 10 years looking down his nose at me, convinced I was a loser who barely scraped by. He didn't know that while he was busy laughing at my simple job, I was busy signing the papers to become his new boss. If you think you can humiliate someone and keep your career safe, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 6 years. I love her more than anything, but being part of her family has been a decade-long nightmare. Her father, Arthur, is a high-level regional manager for a massive logistics firm called Titan Group. He's the kind of guy who wears three-piece suits to a casual Sunday barbecue and talks about his quarterly bonuses while people are trying to eat their burgers. To him, money isn't just a tool, it's a scoreboard. And according to his scoreboard, I was losing. 4 years, I told everyone I worked as a consultant for a small logistics firm. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. I actually own a private holding company called Meridian Capital. We specialize in identifying mid-sized firms with bloated management and poor internal culture, buying them out, restructuring them, and turning them into lean, profitable machines. I don't wear suits. I wear hoodies and jeans. I work from a home office or local coffee shops. To Arthur, because I didn't have a corner office and a secretary, I was basically unemployed. The tension reached a breaking point 3 months ago. Meridian Capital had been quietly negotiating a massive acquisition. The target? Titan Group, the very company Arthur worked for. They were drowning in debt and had a toxic culture of middle management arrogance. I spent 16 hours a day for weeks looking at their spreadsheets. I knew every cent they wasted. I also knew that Arthur's department was the biggest drain on their resources. He wasn't just arrogant, he was inefficient. While I was finalizing the deal to buy his entire company, Arthur was busy making my life miserable at home. It started at a Sunday brunch. He sat across from me, swirling his expensive coffee, and asked how my little project was going. He always called my job a project. He told me that if I ever wanted a real man's job, he could probably get me an entry-level position in the mailroom at Titan. He laughed, a loud, barking sound that made the other tables look over. I just smiled and said I was happy where I was. I knew something he didn't. The ink on the merger was almost dry. The week of the acquisition was intense. I was in the boardroom of a high-rise downtown, surrounded by lawyers and accountants. We were stripping Titan Group down to the studs. I saw Arthur's name on a list of redundant management. Usually, I try to be objective. I try to keep emotion out of business. But as I looked at his name, I remembered every time he called me a burden to his daughter. I remembered him telling Sarah she should have married a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't delete his name from the list. In fact, I moved it to the very top. The final takeover happened on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, I was technically Arthur's boss's boss. He had no idea. The announcement of the buyout was sent to the senior executives first, and the general staff wouldn't know the identity of the new owners until the following Monday. That Friday was Sarah's 30th birthday. We had a big dinner planned at a 5-star steakhouse. Arthur had insisted on picking the place because, in his words, he didn't want me struggling to pay for a meal at a fast food joint on such a special night. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes late. I had just come from the office after signing the final restructuring orders. I was tired, wearing my usual dark jeans and a plain black sweater. When I sat down, Arthur didn't even say hello. He checked his gold watch and sighed loudly. He told the table that some of us have real schedules to keep and that time is money. Something he assumed I didn't understand since I didn't have a real career. Sarah tried to change the subject, but Arthur was on a roll. He started talking about the big changes coming to Titan Group. He'd heard rumors of a buyout and was bragging about how he was surely going to be promoted to vice president once the new owners saw his track record. He looked at me and said, "That's the difference between us, son. I'm a titan of industry. You're a guy who plays on a laptop in his pajamas. You'll never know what it feels like to hold real power." I stayed quiet. I reached into my bag and felt the folder containing the termination notices for the Titan Group restructuring. I had brought it because I needed to drop it off at the courier office after dinner. The silence at the table was heavy. My mother-in-law looked embarrassed. Sarah looked angry, but Arthur just kept going. He took his cloth napkin, balled it up, and literally tossed it at me. It hit my chest and fell into my lap. "Go ahead and be useful," he sneered. "Clean that up. It's probably the most productive thing you'll do all week." That was it. The snap happened in my mind, but I didn't get angry. I got very, very calm. I picked up the napkin, set it neatly on the table, and reached into my bag. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the official letterhead of Meridian Capital. I slid it across the table toward him. Arthur frowned, squinting at the paper. He asked what this garbage was. I told him to read the name at the bottom of the page. He looked down. He saw the name of the company, Meridian Capital. Then he saw the title under it, Chief Executive Officer. And then he saw my signature. His face went from a smug red to a pale, ghostly white. He looked up at me, his mouth hanging open. I told him, "Arthur, you've been talking about power all night. But power isn't about the suit you wear. It's about who owns the chair you're sitting in. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I own your chair, your office, and your paycheck." The restaurant seemed to go silent. I told him that I had been reviewing the logistics reports for Titan Group. I told him his department was 30% over budget and 40% behind on targets. I told him that his track record was actually a roadmap for how to lose money. I watched as the reality set in. He wasn't just being insulted. He was being erased. He tried to speak, to bluster his way out of it, but no words came out. I stood up and pulled out the second paper, his termination notice. I laid it right on top of his steak. I told him that he was being fired for cause, effective immediately, based on documented reports of workplace bullying and gross mismanagement that my team had uncovered during the audit. I told him he had until Monday morning to clear out his desk, or security would do it for him. The look of pure terror in his eyes was more satisfying than any meal I'd ever eaten. My mother-in-law gasped. Sarah sat there, stunned, looking back and forth between us. Arthur finally found his voice and stammered. "You can't do this. This is family." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You told me tonight that I didn't understand business. Well, Arthur, this is just business. You're a liability, and I'm cutting the dead weight." I turned to Sarah, kissed her on the cheek, and told her I'd see her at home. I paid the entire bill for the table on my way out. The aftermath was chaotic. Arthur tried to call my office a dozen times the next day, begging for a meeting. I didn't take the calls. My legal team handled everything. Within a week, he was out of a job, and because of the for cause clause regarding his behavior, his severance package was a fraction of what he expected. He had to sell the fancy car. He had to stop acting like the king of the world. He was just a man who had been outplayed by the person he thought was beneath him. The lesson here is simple. Never mistake a person's silence for a lack of ambition. And never, ever look down on someone because they don't feel the need to shout about their success. You never know when the person you're laughing at might be the person holding your future in their hands. Appearance is a mask, but results are the truth. Arthur learned that the hard way. I didn't just fire a bad employee that day. I took back my dignity. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Do you think I went too far by firing him at a birthday dinner? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Watch this next video for another satisfying revenge story.